Okay, I'm going to open this meeting. It's a budget work session, and I have a couple of, if you all don't mind, you've been really nice to let me start with some of my talk and research and everything, and let me thank you, Amanda, for the new T&E that she provided me, that she provided that gave me a better insight as far as the positions and the finance and all. And also, the budget that we got, of course, had a 2% raise in it, and I appreciate that. I do, before we move forward and I show you this data that I've got, I would like to ask you, just so we review, we had a $96 million budget last year that we approved, but yet we're operating on 102 based on revenue and based on what we spent out of fund balance. So I emailed Karen this week and asked her if she would break that down for us, because whatever we purchased in that 102 is in the budget. So I don't want us to repeat it somewhere, RTI being one of those things. So would you tell them what you told me?
Sure. We started with you approving an FY18 budget of $96,682,932, and to that, the round one of the KEYS expenditures was added, which was $1,132,945, and then round two was added of the KEYS expenditures for $590,000. Then we had sort of a laundry list, I hate to call it that, but it was a list of items that we used fund balance for. And that added up to $1,979,077. And just some of those on there, there was a preschool teacher, there was VACO, some VACO, there was communication expenses, some capital projects, parallel. If you remember, since I came here, those have been coming through as budget amendments. Those added up to $1.9 million, and we did have that list on the expenditure report during some of the months. I think we've taken it off now, but if anybody wants to refresh their memory on that, I can send it to them.
Well, just to be clear, in the KEYS, that included RTI, which you've listed on this, one of the forms, 800 and something for RTI. Is that already in the budget, or was that another additional RTI expenditure?
Well, the way it worked in FY18, let me go through this and finish this total.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah, I just have it on my phone.
I can send. No,
No,
I sent it to Betty.
I just requested the information.
She requested that we talk about it tonight. I should have made copies. I'm sorry.
If we go back,
But I can send you an email.
Why don't you just, I can forward it to
Yeah.
them. Yeah, absolutely.
well, you included this like on a previous board packet in a chart, didn't you? Where it says what we had spent.
The $1.9 million I did.
Okay, and 1132, I believe. Too, but
Yeah.
keep going.
Okay, so and the other one was we got the money from FY18, the 17-18 classroom supply money that we got from the state, $332,150. So that added up to $100,717,104, and then we added $2,029,449 of grants and miscellaneous revenue throughout the year. So that's how we arrived at the $1,227,746, and that was as of April, the end of April. And in answer to your question about RTI, like anything we took out of fund balance, that was a one-time thing. So then we had to add that back into the budget.
Okay.
That answer it?
That answers it.
Okay. So the fact that we've listed RTI again, 836,000.
We're just repeating, but this time we're having to come up with revenue for it. We're not taking it out of fund balance.
Okay. Okay. Any question about that? The reason I wanted her to do that was because I think we're operating at 102,000 as to whether we've generated revenue.
Yeah.
It's what we spent. That's where we are. And yet today you all received a expenditure budget of 112,000. So I think one of the things we want to look at maybe during this time is what we want to send to the commission. What would you like to do about that? But prior to that, and those of you that have been at these budget meetings know that I have been speaking strongly about, I think I refer to it as a freeze, I prefer to say a modification. So I have enough copies of these for everybody in this room, but I want to give these out, and so that you all can follow with me. I had, looking at this, here these are. You leave me one. Here. I did. Here's another one. Just take these all at once. And I did kind of sort of discuss this with Ms. Gagliano the other day at the board meeting when the concept came to my attention. No, there's three. Here. Now, do I have three? No. Okay, this will work. This will work. All right. Did you watch, well, the thing that I have, are you with me?
Which one are we starting on first?
I'm going to talk about the whole thing and then I'll explain it. You can start with the one that has the red list with 17.
Future
50.
salaries and select Middle Tennessee districts.
No, this one with 17.
What's it titled?
There's three. I just happen to have a white copy. I don't know why.
What's it titled up at the
It's
top?
the Murray County Public Schools Steps Increase for Salary Schedule 2018-19. All right. Everybody got a green sheet? You like color, you know? Yeah, okay. If you all will, I wanted you to see the steps and understand that. If you will look down, you see there are 3 steps that there's 0 increases. It's just interesting. Yet there's a step 1, that is after somebody's taught for a year, they get a $1,758 raise. And that goes way back a long time with what was called the Hamilton Amendment. And it had something to do with career ladder, and I don't think I could explain it to you very well. Just trust me, that's why that big jump is. If we were to take 1,200 from that and put it on beginning, all right, then you can look at the next would be proposed, the next one would have on it salary schedule modifications, step 0 through plus 1,200. The salary schedule would look like that. It would cost very little to do that. In the second year, then in year 1, they would be making $533. They'd still have the same and very similar step that the next ones have. So they wouldn't have this humongous jump in that year. It would somewhat make it more equal as the steps come up. And it would cost very little money. Last year, there were 40 people, that's counting masters, doctorate, beginning, bachelors, that did that. Those people then would step up, but in this year, they would get a $533 raise. All right, and then this sheet, this one, shows where that puts us. And I've included all the surrounding counties. I included Giles and those counties because Mr. Bates has talked about how we're going to have a flow of people coming from the south. And if you look at the very bottom, that's with the $1,200 salary scale. That's where our beginning would stack up. If it is red, we're over them. If it's black, we're not. But look where we come if you look at the very top, where we were. So we would be competitive with everyone surrounding us, even Williamson County. And you all know from looking at the salary schedule last week that we do really well in masters and doctorate on up into the salary schedule. So that would make us, it would accomplish it not spending much money. And I think you all had listed on here about $138,000 to do the proposal that I proposed last time. This may cost a little, but very little. Very little. And it would do, and there have been times in the past they talked about doing something about that big 1776 in year one. And do you know anything about the Hamilton Amendment? Do you remember anything? Okay, but that. It had something to do with career ladder. It was to equalize some way or another, and I don't think I can explain it, and it would make sense.
I have a question.
Uh-huh.
If we did that, how many teachers would we have that were first-year teachers last year that we promised that raise to?
40.
Okay, so we had 40 first?
That's what I just said, you had 40.
Okay, so there would be 40 that we would have to give that raise to, and then any that we hired, so it would have to,
I don't know.
Well,
You
it looks
think?
like you're keeping the step one at the same as what it would have been. So their expectation was 38,760, and that's what they'll get.
That's exactly what it would be. It would be
Right.
the same.
Right, what you're
Except not with
increasing
the-
is just the zero, the new starting out teacher with 0 years of experience.
okay, but you're gonna have to decrease that somehow, in my,
I was thinking you were saying that you wanted to take it away from
I
the
want-
step that they were going to.
That's what I'm saying.
That's, so I was thinking what
But
you were
it's really-
thinking.
It's really
additional
not.
money.
Huh?
Steps, I mean, all the rest of the steps are the same, so it's additional money.
Yeah, they're getting a raise. They're getting a 2% raise.
Okay.
And they're getting a step raise.
Okay.
And I doubt you could ask any one of them what that raise is. I mean, today. But yes, they'd still be getting, and they'd be getting a step raise comparable to what they would get almost every year.
but so the second year, the,
Year one.
okay, so that's after they finished a year?
Because when they're hired, it's 0. so,
Okay,
yeah.
so the people that were hired last year and they finished a year, we're gonna go ahead and give them the $1,700 step raise.
No,
Well, that's what they were hired and expecting, though.
they're only hired for a year. at
Oh,
a
okay, so
time.
they-
They're, on- they, s-
And I guess that's what's kind of deceiving is because salary schedules will match it as far as increase. So what it was 38,760 and what it will still be is 38,760.
that's right, that's right.
So they're still gonna get that raise?
They're still gonna get it.
They're gonna get the whole 1776?
Yes.
Okay.
Because it includes the 2%. I'm not sure what I'm saying at this moment, but, I thought that this would be the salary schedule for this one, which means they would be making 38,760, and I don't have the salary schedule as it is right now. I maybe have it with me.
Well, step 0 right now is 36,259,
Right.
and step 1 is 38,000 even.
Okay, so they'd really be making,
They would get a
they get a
$760 increase.
$760
The
increase.
5 and the 12,
And that's including their 2% raise?
Mhm. I mean, it wouldn't accomplish anything if you said, oh, but next year we're gonna give you 1758, and then hire people when you hire somebody, that's the salary schedule under which they're hired. And you're only on a contract for 1 year anyway. And it would equalize it. David, did you all get copies of all this? Yes.
What it looks like it's doing, it's just removing that $1,700, because 38,000 times 2% is 38,760. So, it's just removing that $1,700 from that first line is what it looks like.
Just starting them higher, and they fall right back in line.
Right. It's
Yeah,
just
and
that 0
that
year
makes
experience.
sense to me, but I was just thinking if the teachers that we had last year, you know, that are expecting that $1,776 step raise.
They're gonna get it.
Well, and they would still get it, because right now it's at 36,259, that's 0 years starting out. 1 year is 38,000, so they were
Okay.
expecting 38,000.
Okay,
And then if they get a 2% increase, that's 38,760, so they still get what they were expecting,
but we will be raising the first year
the first year only.
and,
We're not doing it since we're not taking
away from the second year to raise the first year. You're just.
That's what I thought we were doing.
That's what made me
Yeah.
think that.
You see, that's what I thought you were saying, that we take.
That's what I think I'm saying. I think you have to
That's-
take it
no,
away.
It's not taken away from anything. It's all new money.
It's,
It's all new money.
but it
Yeah.
won't cost much.
It won't.
No, not if you take it away from the 17.
But you're not,
You're not
because they're
taking away
getting,
from it, though.
they're
It
getting the
hasn't
same
changed.
thing.
Year one is always the same.
Adding the year 0, that's all. But you're not taking away from year 1, according to what you said.
Well, then that's,
According to what they said, what he said, what you've said, and what you and I are thinking we're hearing.
but then you'll
is that we're
still have
taking
this
away
big
from the
gap
first
between
year,
0 and
not
1.
zero year, the first year. So those people going from 0 to first.
Can somebody calculate what not cost much, because VACO wasn't gonna cost much either.
Well, I said not cut much because I was gonna put the 1,200 on beginning and take it away from, just moving it.
Well, and it would depend on how many people, it would depend on how many first-year teachers you had and how many new hires, 0-year teachers you had to
So it's gonna-
offset it.
That would be, no matter what, that would be that would be constant.
So this year, we would go ahead and pay the 1776, but next year, and we would hire the new teachers in at the higher level, and then next year, it would only be the 700 and whatever. So it would stay all new hires this year, it would raise that, and then next year, it would balance out. Am I right?
That's what I'm.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
what I'm thinking.
So then there is a cost involved,
Yes.
Yes. How many, I was gonna get, how many new year?
just for 1 year.
Zero year
Not
teachers
if
do
we
we,
don't
on
hire
average,
any
do we
new
hire per
teachers
year?
this year.
It fluctuates, which hopefully our hiring will be a lot less.
We had a lot less retirees, and it looks like we're having less resignations, so we're hoping for a lower turnover this year. But the majority of our new teachers are 0 and bachelors.
What would be like a 3-year average on that?
I'll
Ballpark.
have
You
to get
give me
that.
Do you have any kind of ballpark number?
I can get that.
I mean, that's really what we're talking about. I mean,
Well, if you
we're
look
talking
right
about that
now,
some change there.
we have 31 with a bachelor's, 9 with a master's, and 1 with a doctorate. So we had 41 new teachers this past year that we hired on
Is that
0.
about normal, what we normally
Yes,
see?
I would say so.
Thank you.
Last week, we talked about a modification that would raise it 0 at what level 0, 1, 2 is. We talked about that. This is another option. Which option do you all feel would be best? I do think this one will cost less, even if we do pay the 17, but I don't have figures on that. What do you guys think?
I'd have to know what the figures are, just off the top of my head, there's no way for me to.
No.
I guess my question is, if you're a 0-year teacher, can you take the $1,200 step raise from, is that something that we would, and not give them that $1,200 step, $1,200 of that and put it on the first year? I don't think that.
No, you want, the object is try to get beginning more competitive.
That's what I'm
Yeah.
saying, put it on 0 year,
That's what
but you've already basically promised them that step raise, correct?
They'll still get it.
Okay.
You're adding money to that 0 year. It's gonna be new money.
Yeah, so it's gonna cost more money. And then next year it would balance out.
Well, at some point, year 1 would change if we were to go with this. If you said add 1,200 to beginning. If you had made it flow through the whole, salary schedule, then it would cost a lot of money. But if it was just at 1,200 at that, and then remove it from that year 1.
So what you're saying is that this year, 0-year teachers this year, next year would. And the new higher rate, they're, after their first year, they would only get 700 and
They'd
go
get
down
step
to
raises,
700.
yes.
Okay.
Mr. Dudley, to answer your question, my quick math says if we're hiring 40 to 41 zero-year teachers a year at $1,200, we're looking at just shy of 50 grand is what cost is. If that answers your question, I think that's where you were looking at.
Which I think 138 is what we, something like that was what we were
Whoa.
looking at doing the other.
Oh, okay. Don't confuse me with new numbers.
So we're talking, about 50,000.
Freezing, making this figure, this one, on the other scour, that would be 0, and then we would have the same for 3 years. Not a freeze, but a modification.
Using this schedule, modified schedule that we're talking about, would the people with 16 years and 18 years start getting a raise?
Mr., let me answer that, because that's something that for many years we tried to get them to put a step raise for year 16, year 18, and of course 20 and beyond, there's no step raise, but that would cost money. I mean, it is something that I think ought to be in there, but it would cost money.
Well, I mean, I think it's a little bit unfair to those teachers to have served that period of time, and then you know, you're going 2 years right there, and then actually if you stay beyond 20, you got three periods that you don't get any raise. I mean, other than what the state may pass along.
It's, at year 20, though, you have got, I'm looking even at the T&E that we looked at last week that Amanda has adjusted for me. You're looking at over 200 people, and then it's 16, and, I mean, I can tell you that it has been looked at before, and it probably definitely needs to be done, but once again, it costs money.
I mean, what it appears to be that when we get teachers with that many years' experience, that we're trying to force them out of the system.
That's true.
If you wanted to enhance it, sometimes, you know, you can do like a multi-year plan too, and break it up, you know, select the year 20 to do something this year, maybe, or, you know, like that. If you
Or-
wanted to do something, but you couldn't do it all.
If the 1,200 off, I mean, if it goes into effect after the first year, if we do the 1,200 at beginning, and then it would go into effect, that there would be, that maybe next year, we could look at 16, and then after that, see, it's at 16, 18, and then 20 and beyond. They still get percentage raise, but no step raise.
Would the number of retirees we have offset the added starting salary for 0 year?
We would hope, because of course, you know, they're the higher paid, so they're moving out, and we'll hire the 0 years experience. So yes, I mean, we would hope it. The only thing is the low number that we have this year. We just don't have a lot of turnover, so we'll just have to see.
How many did we have retiring?
Total was like
31,
38.
38.
Yeah,
And
that's,
we had to
well,
count
that's
'em.
support and licensed, but
And we have approximately 40 coming in. These are at a higher rate than this, right?
right. If all of those are hired with 0 years experience, so we'll just have to see. It's hard to forecast that. We have to look, of course, and see where our vacancies are now, and then a lot of shifts throughout the
Okay.
system.
I'm glad at you guys. Way above me.
Last week I gave you all that, you might even can just glance at that if you still have it, and it shows how many were at that position in, like, even though they're more in there, I think Amanda added about 100 positions in looking at it a different way, so you can see how many at each level that we would have to increase their salary.
Have we looked at the number of teachers that we have in the schools, and are we where we want to be in the schools with the number of teachers that we have? Are we over or under or any, that instead of hiring new teachers, we can, because that was one of the things that we were gonna look at to lower the budget. Is that something that we've done, or?
Yes, ma'am, I have a report. Give me just 1 second here. So first thing I'd like to say is that I think this is something that needs to be a last resort. I'd like to think that we go to the commission with what our needs are and ask for what we need before we resort to thinking about removing positions and things like that. But through the master schedule review process, had a chance to look at where schools are staffed, what staffing ratios look like, and what teacher to pupil ratios look like. And again, this is not class averages, but it's just teacher to pupil ratios. Looking at Columbia Central, the teacher to student ratio was about 15-1. At Culleoka, the teacher to student ratio was about 16-1. EA Cox was about 14-1. Hampshire was about 12-1. Highland Park was about at 12-1 with an enrollment of 297. Woodard was at about 16-1. Brown was about 13-1. Baker was at 16-1. Marvin Wright was at about 16-1. McDowell Elementary was at about 15-1. Mount Pleasant Elementary was 15-1. Mount Pleasant High School was 14-1. Mount Pleasant Middle School was 16-1. Randolph Howell was at about 14-1. Riverside Elementary, 13-1. Santa Fe Unit, 15-1. Spring Hill Elementary School was at about 15-1. Spring Hill High School was at about 15-1. And looks like Spring Hill Middle, 19-1, and Whitthorne Middle, 22-1. So again, that doesn't necessarily mean that there are 22 kids in every seat. Seat capacity, there are a lot of factors that determine seat capacity. So this is just the average enrollment for the school divided by how many active teachers were on a roster, and that gives you a ratio. When you look at that number factors in for the high schools CTE teachers. It factors in also for all the schools SPED teachers who don't necessarily have a classroom but who also push into rooms for support. So that would offset what class sizes look like. But on average, we talked to you all about right sizing the district, about raising those ratios, which would raise class sizes a little bit, which would give you an indication of what extra personnel would be available if you choose to look at cutting some personnel. So yes, I would say yes, we do have some room.
That helped to specify as far as CTE and SPED. And I think those numbers are a little bit misleading when you have that factored in, considering the fact that you're talking about 14 kids when you may have a special ed class that can only have 4 or 5.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's really going to throw your numbers off significantly, at least from my seat, because I know I'm thinking about certain schools that I know that the class size is greater than the size of some people's graduating classes.
Mm-hmm.
So, but that's not what your numbers have reflected. So.
Right. Remember, this is not class size averages. This is just
I understand,
teacher-to-student
but I'm just
ratio.
saying.
Just
it doesn't-
ratios.
I mean, we've got, I almost feel like you have to look at those ratios though, because if
Right.
you have a teacher for special ed and you're offering special ed services,
Mhm.
and you're counting that towards enrollment, and then you're counting that teacher, but that teacher can't have 20 kids.
Well, that's what I mentioned
So-
earlier. That's what I was saying earlier. When you look at special ed,
And I
they
understand.
push in
That's
so
what
they
I'm-
don't have classrooms. Right. They're not kids in there, which is going to raise the class sizes. Right.
Correct. It's just a little misleading. I think it would be better if we looked at actual classroom teachers and the, enrollment for those classes and try to figure it out that way. Otherwise, I think it's very misleading where we're at.
Well, and like Dr. Woodard said, we're not there yet. That's something that if, Well, I mean, when we get down to what we have to cut, I think that's something that we should really, that we can look at.
Absolutely.
I'm not sure that we're there just yet, so.
I have a question. Did we not get any growth money, growth money? Last year, we got growth money, and we gave $150 to each teacher and $350 for their classroom supplies. We had more students this year, so did we not get some growth money? BEP growth money? How much did we get?
Yeah, we're still waiting for June, but tentatively, right now, it's about an additional $534,000.
Is that the money, though, that has been designated for teacher raises? Or is that extra money?
No, that's additional FY18 money
Okay.
that we're putting into the 71-100 line because
Okay.
we under budgeted that line in order to make the 3% raise last year work.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we're still short.
Okay, I think there's lots to discuss here, but I think that one of the things that Mr. Dudley last week talked about, what we need to take to the county commission, do we take them and say we want them to fund $112 million budget, or do we try to whittle it down a little bit and maybe be a little more realistic in hopes that they will, I don't know. What do you all think? Mr. Dudley?
Well, I've said many years that it's this board's duty to determine what we need to keep a first-class school system. If we need $112 million to do that, we need to ask for $112 million. And then if the county commission says, no, we're not gonna fund a first-class school system, we're gonna go back to the way it was years ago, we're gonna drop down to a mediocre school system. You know, they made that decision. And so we need to ask for what we need to keep funding a first-class school system. Dr. Marzak last week said that the lack of the proper funding affected his ability to move some of his items forward. And so we need to show support for him and ask for what we need to keep this full first-class system going.
Are all of the software ask is in this 112? So even though we've asked you to prioritize, and those are things areas we might not fund at all totally, but all of that, and so this is the Cadillac, this is everything. Right. So Kim.
We're still underfunding facilities.
That's true. Ms. Powers, Ms. Parker.
I guess a question I have is when you talk about staffing needs, I know that we've lost some members this year. Ms. Hanvey, where did her salary, where did those monies get moved to make sure we're a first-rate school system since we lost her?
It was a true cut. I think the dollar amount was $117,000. We just are not going to replace that position.
Right, but I mean, your numbers are not going down. I mean, where did you move that 117 is what I'm asking, because I'm sure that your budget is probably still up there, right?
Maybe a little bit, but not a whole lot of fluff and instruction. We are on a skeleton crew.
Okay.
It is bare bones, but I'll let Dr. Marzak elaborate further if you'd like to elaborate.
I mean, the only thing I can think of is we moved that into 71-100 line to accommodate increases for teachers. He just reduced his budget by $117,000 between salary and benefits. That's it. Just reduced it.
So what about Marlena when she left? I mean, I guess what I'm saying is when I think back about when I first came onto this board, we had, for example, we had an elementary supervisor, a middle school supervisor, a high school supervisor. We don't have that anymore.
Yep.
And to be completely honest with you, I think our instruction has really suffered since we've changed that, particularly in the elementary school level. I don't know what we actually get out of the elementary school since we've taken that position away. And so I'm just curious where that money's gone, because I know it hasn't gone to buy resources. So I'm just curious where
So
what
the
we're
money
doing with
for
it.
the elementary supervisor position still exists in some form or fashion because the elementary lead principal gets a dean of students to help them run their school when they're out of the building and meetings or helping other principals do the things that they're going to do. We currently have the position for high school supervisor posted. So we'll be, I guess Dr. Wood will be interviewing soon for that position. So the only position that just naturally just went away and that money was taken out of the budget was the director of programs position.
If you all can pull up the master schedule and go to 72210, and thank you for making this readable. It's there that it shows that position, that decrease. And that is on page 14 of 42. Yeah.
I just will say that if we're gonna ask for $11 million more than we asked for last year that we didn't get, I really wish we had done this like a month ago. I mean, I
Yeah.
think at this point, to take this to the county commission is gonna be very insulting to them. That's just my personal opinion, because I don't think that we have a Cadillac, and I don't think this is gonna make us a Cadillac.
I personally would like to hone it down some and then send it to them with a much more realistic ask. I would have my doubts as to whether they would or could fund it with 11 million extra ask, and it would just be more work on our part. Perhaps that it comes back, and so maybe we need to do our work and maybe get it to a more realistic ask. Mr. Bates, I'm sorry.
Thank you. And I'm certainly sensitive to what we request. You know, I definitely want us to be reasonable. And I do think that if there's anything within this particular budget that we deem to be unreasonable or unnecessary or not needed for our schools, we should, by all means, I think we should cut that out on the front end before asking. I don't think we should send a request to the county commission with fluff added. I do think that at the end of the day, while I'm sensitive to the commissioners and I want them to like our budget, at the end of the day, the people that we represent are the students and the schools. And so I think that's the paramount thing that we have to determine as a board is, you know, what is in the best interest of the students in our school system. We have to figure that out, and if that's a need, then I think we submit that need to the county. And we tell the county, look, this is the type of investment that needs to be made to have a first-class school system. It may be that they don't fund that, but I feel like at that point we've done our job of representing the schools and representing the school system. If they, the county may not either be able or feel like it's warranted to make those investments, then that's a decision they have to make. And if they deem that it's not appropriate to make those that amount of investment that we believe as a board is necessary, then in some ways when we have to make those tough decisions and we have to make that cut, I mean, we've done our job. That's really their responsibility at that point. And so if we have to, I know that we're looking at the possibility of having to cut positions and having to cut personnel, and that's something that's very difficult. I think our plan A should always go to the county commission is to ask what we need. And then if they say, I'm sorry, you're not gonna get what you need, and we have to make those tough decisions and we have to make eliminations, that sort of thing, then we're carrying out what their decision is, so.
Anyone else? Yes, Karen.
I just wanted to point out something, like, if you look at the comparison of FY18 expenditures to FY19 expenditures, that's where you go from $1.2 million to $1.012 million, or an increase of 9.6. But what you're really comparing is FY19 column of expenditures versus FY19 column of revenues. And the gap between the revenues and expenditures is $13,018,143. Just so you're looking at that right, because it's a little misleading.
On Monday evening, board members, you asked for me to prepare a report for you that prioritized a list of these educational programs that we currently have, so that you can get an idea of what
Time out.
of what we need versus what could go. And so, Mr. Breeden's gonna pass that out now, and once he's given everybody a copy, then I'll kind of go over that with you. Overall, if you were to fund the full suite of academic programs that we have, it would cost somewhere around $1.6 million. So, again, at the top of this list, you can see that these are the things where it says required. These are things that we have to have. We have to have a universal screener for RTI. Chalkable is our student management system that all of our student data is contained within. We have to have that. Follett is our textbook inventory system, and it also does the library books. We need about $3,000 for the interpreters. Mental health and behavioral support is around $15,000. We have to have the credit recovery system, the Ingenuity. We have to have that vehicle. School messenger, we feel that we must have that. That's a must. And then, of course, the Discovery Science Tech Book, which is the adopted text. Those are things that we felt were must-haves for the district. When you get to the bottom of the page, now you see things that we had to prioritize, okay? Top priority was given to Discovery Education for PD and training at about $715,000. Our second priority was Power School Assessment, in which we built all of our formative assessments at $91,000. ESGI, which is our K-1 assessment tool, that came in third. 10 marks was fourth. The IO dashboard, Jobs for Tennessee graduates, Power School LMS, which is our online PD platform and our online course content builder. Dreambox and Mine were all things that were not necessarily in the top 5 and things that we felt that if you had to make cuts, they were things that we felt like if you just had to, we didn't feel as strongly. The top 5 we would love to have and keep, but everything below that, we respect whatever your decision is. If you choose to remove those programs from the system, again, we'd love to have them all, to be honest. But again, we respect your decision if you choose to cut anything below 5. But the top 5, we think we really need to have. Could I answer any questions regarding this?
Were any of these on contracts that we had to renew?
Let me talk about contracts. So I've been on the phone and working with folks on contracts, and I've had my team on this. We are actually in fairly good shape with regard to most of these contracts. Just give me 1 second. I have a lot of papers. With regard to, I guess the biggest contract, of course, is Discovery. We are locked into Discovery for 2 more years. So that's the one where we have to do it for 2 more years. On some of the others, we're not bound. 10 Marks is going to go away. Amazon, 10 Marks is an Amazon product. It's going away. They will not offer that product after this year, so that takes care of itself. So after this year, we're going to have to have a different supplemental math tool for 5 through 12. So we'll be looking for something different anyway. And that could be iExcel or some other platform, but we'll be looking for a new platform starting next year for 10 Marks. So that deletes one problem. With Myon, we're allowed to get out of the Myon contract as long as we give them written notice. Dreambox is a little trickier. We can get out of the Dreambox contract, but we have to send a letter to them, and then we also have to certify that we're not going to pick up another program that will compete with them. And as long as we don't pick up a competing program, that we would not be violating any terms of the contract. But we could get out of that obligation if we choose to as well. So yes, we could get out of these. I'm going to have Jake look at these.
Why would we ever sign a contract like that? That's horrible.
I think it was because it was a multi-year deal. That's why.
I'm going on notice for saying it's a horrible contract.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yes, horrible contract. Keep going, sorry.
Okay. You threw me off, right?
Oh, there's more coming, just wait.
Okay. Well, I think the reason for that was it was because it was a multi-year deal. But obviously, if we're not paying them, they're saying that, hey, we don't want you to pick up someone else and enter into another deal with a service provider that provides the same services that they would provide. So again, we can get out of that one. So we're in pretty good shape as far as getting out of some of these if we needed to. And again, we yield to the board to whatever you feel is best, and we respect whatever decision you all choose to make with regard to this. I am gonna ask Jake, I brought my black notebook here, which houses all of our contracts, and I'm gonna ask Jake just to put his legal, eyes over this. Again, I'm not a lawyer, not an attorney. There's some fine print. I just wanna be sure, but I feel pretty confident that we're able to move forward if we need to.
I'm sorry, it's not. Any other comments about this? Yes, sir. Mr. Moore?
Okay. We keep talking about software stuff, and this is just, and I don't know if this is even possible for this year. Because we keep getting into this kind of back and forth as a board member, we're trying to figure out what's, and I'll be honest, I'm torn on this because I see a dollar figure. I know we approved most of these while we were here. Sometimes 2 years or 3 years later, it's hard to remember why we did things, on what the purpose for, and it may have been sold to us really well at the time, and I don't know. I guess for me, this would all be a lot easier if I had an understanding, or if we had an understanding of the purpose of each of these, rather than just this is a new product and we want to bring it in. Does that make sense? It would be easier to understand if here's a need we're trying to fill. Let's say the 10 marks, the supplemental math. That one's pretty easy to understand, that we're trying to fill a math, or something that we need, that we got deficiency, or we're trying to supplement some kind of math thing. And as a board member, it would be a lot easier to understand and justify these things if I knew, if we picked what the need was before we picked what the product was that's filling the need. Because sometimes it feels like we pick a product and we stick it into wherever we think it's going to go. It looks nice, like a nice fit, and we justify it that way. It would be nice if we knew, again, as a board member, it seems to me it would be nice if I knew exactly, like, we're trying to do something in math this year or for the next 3 years, and we're going to go out and seek a product, whether that's software, books, I don't know, but that's the need we're trying to fill, and we're going to meet that need. Does anybody else follow me on that, or am I completely not making sense? It would make a lot of sense for me to be able to follow that. So when we talk about it in the next year and the next year, we're not just supporting a product, we're filling a need. Some of these, I'll be honest, as a board member, I don't know what exactly, now maybe that's my own ignorance on that, or maybe I've forgotten what it is. I don't always know what need we're exactly filling with these. Again, some of them are a little easier to understand than others. I have kids in elementary school, so some of them I can see what they're working on. It's a little easier to understand whether people like them or not. I get what they're going towards. Some of the other ones I just don't know. So I mean, that may be helpful moving forward as we talk about these kind of products, that staff clearly identifies what we're doing, what we're looking to do, and that way it keeps us all kind of focused on whether or not what product is, whether it's meeting that or not. And I think it would help you guys with measurement too, so we can justify it the next year or the next year. If it's meeting that need, I guess we're going back to being able to benchmark and do a dashboard reporting on those things. We can all see what it's doing, and it's very clear whether or not we need to keep doing it.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember which board meeting, I'm going back and look, which board meeting that these were on the agenda with the keys that they furthered. And then at the April board meeting, Dr. Preninger came and did a report on each of these to show what's the growth over time. How are kids doing with regards to the software? As long with a recommendation to continue to push on. Students are making growth in this area. Students are showing growth in this area. So we did that during the April board meeting, during the March-April timeframe, because we wanted to give plenty of time before these renewals came back up, before we brought them back to the board for approval. So. Yes, it is. Yeah, it's on the April board. It's on the April board meeting. It's okay.
I'll just say for me, a lot of these things are add-ons. Like, I just want to know that our teachers have what they need, that they are not spending hundreds of dollars to purchase reading series for their classrooms or whatnot. That's what I want to know, that we've met that baseline. And we haven't, not even with our Cadillac budget that we had last year, supposedly. So I know that those needs have not been met. So it's real hard for me to justify these things, especially when I hear from a lot of them, it's a waste of money. So, and as a parent, I think a lot of it's a waste of money. So as a taxpayer, I think a lot of it's a waste of money. I think they're nice add-ons. I know that they've given us some free things before on other various things, robots and things like that. But at the end of the day, I want to make sure that we're addressing the baseline before we start doing the add-ons to our car, so to speak. And I thought that part of what we were trying to do when we were shifting to this one-to-one was looking at how to go digital and have things that weren't going to cost us an arm and a leg. All these free online resources that, you know, the world is our oyster with this device here, I thought. And so I don't really understand why we still have to have $1.6 million in stuff when the pearls should be here, I thought, for free. So, I mean, I understand some things are going to cost money, but I just think that this is, I know that you can make the numbers say whatever as far as the growth for kids and things like that. And I'm not discounting that there's growth. I just think that there may be even more growth if we actually targeted the things that, you know, the teachers really said they need, like reading series and things like that, as opposed to having them on.
I'd like to comment to that. I respect your comments on that, but I would like to push you a little bit, just respectfully. And I want to be honest with you, Ms. Parker. We've had a lot of dialogue and a lot of rhetoric this year about not having K-2 resources or textbooks. And I think you and I both know that when we look at the budget last year, the budget for textbooks was $94,000. What I presented to this board was a cost of $1.4 million to have adequate textbooks. So we can't get it done with the limited number that we had last year. On top of that, no, I get it. And also about K-2, you know, I'll be honest with you. My department's taking some heat over K-2 this year. And respectfully, we did not have that in our budget last year. The priority last year was giving the teacher raises, and that's what we did. So we didn't have the funding for K-2 resources. And so if we decide to make that the priority, then if that's the priority, then that's the priority. You know, this year I felt confident that we're not going to pass a budget unless it's included. So we haven't included. That cost is there this year. But it was not there last year. And so I just want to make sure that I'll take all the heat and criticism in the world.
I'm not directing the criticism at you,
I
Dr.
just-
Woodard, because you weren't in that position when we were
Right.
doing the budget last
just-
year. But you were in that
Right.
position when we were looking at the Keys budget
Right.
and allocating money throughout the fall. And I go back to, if that stuff is important to us, then we find a way to fund it. If we need to fund an increase to GCA or whoever, I mean, custodial services, we found a way to do that.
Right.
I'm just a little surprised that K-2, we don't, but it's not just K-2. And I think you know that, because when you actually look at the textbook numbers, there are classes that still have classroom sets. Each child does not have a book. And I understand the cost is pretty significant.
Pretty hefty.
But this budget doesn't even address that particular, as I understood it, it didn't address the needs for all students. So I still think that we're not at the baseline, and we're still trying to do the add-ons.
Correct. You know, what we're giving you for textbooks is around $877K. I think if you choose to make cuts in some of these programs, then that money can, you know, if we want to put $600,000 the other way, and you know, we'll have the 1.4 I think that we need.
See, and that's where I mentioned these particular positions that we've had before, and then they've retired or whatnot, and
Right.
so we're not paying that out necessarily, and yet we still are not moving that money. I don't know where we're moving that money to. I would just be curious as to where we've moved those expenses that aren't being paid to staff members that have left. Because I would hope it would be going to your instruction budget so that you can be able to purchase some of those things that teachers and students need.
Right.
Thank you. I seem to remember you gave us 3 options. Is that the board voted on it, and is that the option that's in the budget?
We didn't vote.
Okay.
I don't think we voted. We did not vote. Yeah, we just.
We gave direction? Okay. And that was the
I don't know that we
Was-
gave anything. I think you just picked.
I mean, I don't understand if you brought it before the board and told us and asked us which one we wanted.
I
and-
felt like what I was hearing from the board in the conversation was that option 2 was the most reasonable, and I'm gonna defer to my brother Carver over there. He also talked about how that proposal would work in terms of where we're trying to go with one-to-one, and how some of the money could help us go one-to-one a little faster. I don't know if John would like to speak to some of that. I think that was a rationale for option 2 as opposed to option 1 with the $1.4 million.
Here, I'll take it back to my coaching days. Right, there were 3 proposals that were put forward, and Dr. Woodard's proposal was the second one, which I supported because it did allocate some more funding to increase or to look at online curriculum and open source, and then looking at also additional diploma devices and such. It was kind of the in-between, the compromise piece. I think it's important that the board continue to move forward with providing the devices because, as Ms. Parker mentioned, that if every child has that oyster, they can dive into it and get the things that they need and such. But I do believe there was not a vote that night. I think it was just the consensus, and that I guess that was my takeaway from the evening, was to go with that second option.
Which then kind of bridges the greater conversation. Where do you guys want to go as a district, as a board? Do we want to move down the digital pathway, or do we want to move down the paper and pencil pathway? Because, Ms. Parker, you're exactly right. There's a lot of resources out there that kids can access for free. My recommendation would be, if you guys want to do that, let's save some money, roll back one-to-one, and just provide money for workbooks and worksheets. Because unfortunately, a lot of those websites are they're worksheets. They're just interactive. So instead of coloring fractions on a paper, you click on the fractions on the screen. So we could save a lot of money by rolling back diploma and parlaying that money over into paper and text resources for kids and teachers. You can save a lot of money, because really what we're doing is we're providing a $700 per kid worksheet generator, which we could save a lot of money and just do workbooks a lot. And so the kind of where do you guys want to go as a board? You put diploma and you put teachers teaching how to use technology more effectively into the strategic plan. But, I mean, we'd save a lot of money if we rolled back diploma. We'd save a lot of money. I think it's almost like 1.1 million. It's 1 million per year for the first round of leases. We're looking at additional $300,000 per year for $900,000 in additional leases, plus software programs. I mean, we'd save a lot of money if we rolled that back. But I think that's a decision as a board. Where do you guys want to go? Do you want to move forward digital? Do you want to move forward paper pencil? Districts have tried to do both, and they've failed, because you can't do both. Because you got to determine where the resources go. If you only half it, you're only going to get half implementation, half success. You got to decide where you want to put your pot of money. Do you want to put it in digital, or you want to put it in paper resources? So that's kind of where where do you guys want to go?
But are you suggesting we go back and put slate boards on the walls in the classrooms?
No, I think we can stay with dry erase. I don't think chalkboards are necessary, but.
Ms. Parker.
I think that's part of the problem, though, is I think what we've done with diplomas so far, we've just been halfway. I think we are still trying to do both.
Yeah.
And we don't have our foot all the way in on going one-to-one. But I don't think that you've ever really brought us the actual cost to go completely digital across the system. So if we were going to put a device in 12,000 kids' hands, what does that cost? What does that look like? What's that annual cost for us?
Yeah.
Right. I think I've brought to the board a couple of times that, and my focus has always been 3 through 12. And I want to say for every child to have a device 3 through 12 on an annual basis with the device that we've currently selected, it's like, and please don't hold me to it, but it's like $3.5 million a year. Okay? And so, as Dr. Marzak already mentioned, we're $1.3 million, and we've got 40% of the kids with devices. And as you saw at the last board meeting, the kids that do have them, they're running. And so it's that chicken or an egg. The other thing to make mention of too is when you go back to textbooks, you're looking at consumables. And textbooks have a very short shelf life. And it's just like a new car. You drive it off the lot and it depreciates. Whereas if we can get to a point, you know, following the board's vision and you know, Dr. Marzak's vision of going completely digital, then as far as textbook renewals, access to new information, all of that, the shelf life is not that important at that point because you're able to get the updates. The analogy somebody once told me was like, you remember the yearbook encyclopedias and how you used to get the yearbook at the end? Well, when you go digital, you're not getting that yearbook at the end. The whole thing is being updated at the same time. The other option, and as far as the diploma piece goes, usually when I go into a new position, I take the first year just to kind of see how it all lays out and where the strengths and weaknesses are. I know that the device, and Dr. Marzak and I haven't had a long conversation on this, but I've had a conversation with Mr. Schuyler, in that the device that we have in place right now has the option of both the touch screen and the keyboards. You know, is there something, and it's $760 to lease, and it's through the Tennessee Department of Ed. They're the ones that did the groundwork for it. Do we look at a different device at a lesser price point? I'll just throw that out. Now, the thing you got to keep in mind, though, is a different device, Chromebooks, if you would, do not necessarily have the durability of the device that we have right now. It's kind of use it and throw it away. And so I guess it's my intention to go around and talk to all the diploma principals this year that had devices in their buildings and to get some feedback from them as to successes and where do we go from here. Because I think I've mentioned to the board, we're here and we want to get here, and so how do we get across this piece? And this piece right here is very uncomfortable. It is. It's uncomfortable for you. It's uncomfortable for me. Because I want to get here now. I think you got to have a transition, and I'll be honest with you, that's one of the things that I've been working on the last week is trying to figure out, okay, we've gone through a year, our first year, 40% of the kids have the devices. How do we continue to move that number? And Dr. Marzak shared at one of the county commission meetings, and I echoed that, you know, if we're going to do the technology, it needs to be I just went blank, perpetual protected funding stream that we can count on every year. Something that can't be robbed or reallocated for something else. I don't know if that answers your questions and such. I would tell you that you know, I'm convinced, guys, going digital has cost savings. We just need to figure out a way to get there. And working with the county commission, I guess the county commissioners I've talked with, everyone I see on the street, they say, okay, you know, where are we going to go? How are we going to get there? And, you know, again, we're looking at an additional, you know, and maybe recalibrate it as well, too. I mean, ultimately, by 2026, the vision is to have everybody grades 3 through 4, or 3 through 12. Maybe we recalibrate it that we're looking at 5th grade and above. And then there's a later phase in for the elementaries. I think I've shared with the board, I know I've shared with leadership, that because we have multiple 4th grades going into 5th grade, we're pretty much committed to provide every 5th grader with a device in the district. We're pretty much committed to do that. But in moving those devices up, most of our elementary school, or excuse me, our middle schools are going to have at least 2 or 3 grade levels that are 1-to-1. The question I'll be having with Dr. Marzak is, what do we do with grades 3 through 4? Do we backfill?
K through 4.
I'm just going off the operation.
I understand what you're going
And
off
see,
of.
the thing of it is too, with the K2, the building principals have been getting iPads. I mean, the board, you authorize the use of iPads in those lower levels. So there are devices in all the campuses. There are devices in all the buildings, but we haven't reached a saturation point yet. And again, guys, this is the first full year that we've had grade levels. So there's, again, I look forward to having conversations with leadership as to, do we recalibrate the cannonballs and take a different focus?
When will y'all have that discussion? Because I think that might be really good feedback to have for what we're trying to do from a budget standpoint. Because if
Sure.
you guys are trying to readjust the cannonball and you're saying you don't want textbooks per se, then that $800,000, yes, maybe we need to shift it someplace else. I just don't want you guys to forget about K through 2 like we've forgotten about for the last 3 years.
Yeah.
But aside from, and I'm not blaming that on you, Dr. Woodard. I know that you were not here. I know that you just happened to be in that seat. I mean, Dr. Marzak got the emails a year ago around this time, so, you know, it's not something that is just come up on this board. But I do think that if you guys can have that conversation about recalibrating it, I mean, 5th through 12th sounds a lot more reasonable to me than what we've been trying to do, to be completely honest with you. But that's for y'all to decide and for y'all to implement and for y'all to figure out the best way to do it without breaking our bank, is the way I look at it. But what we have right now doesn't actually get us there. And we're still $11 million over, right?
Right.
So that's a little frustrating.
Mr. Moore, your light's on.
I don't even know where to start. Okay, so, Mr. Carver, I know you're saying that the 3.5 million covers devices, but I guess the problem I have is we still haven't had as far as I've seen, a really in-depth discussion on what the swap out would be, because that still doesn't cover whether we're buying software or getting, I mean, there's still gonna be some of these software costs, I would assume, or some other software costs. There's gonna be additional IT or tech costs that go with the fact that we've, tripled the number of devices in the system. We haven't decided or talked about whether we're going with the free online textbooks or paid textbooks where we do subscriptions. I still haven't seen like a one-to-one cost, and I think further adding to that is the fact that, like I think Ms. Parker said, we're not even covering the basics as it is. We haven't even been fully funding textbooks to be able to know what the baseline is for replacing textbooks. I just wish we would pick one and go with it. I mean, I know you're somewhat tongue-in-cheek saying that we need to go back to paper and pencil, but if it gets the basics covered at this point, I'd be more in favor of that than just floundering around and trying to do a little bit of everything. I mean, I hate to say that because we've already devoted a lot of time and energy to it, but I'm frustrated too that it feels like there's just no purpose to it. There's no focus to it, like we're getting anywhere. It feels like we're doing a lot of things. We're doing a lot of devices at some schools, not all the schools. We're doing a lot of software that some people like and not everybody likes. We're going to be this next year adding in a lot more textbooks that we haven't been doing. I'm just not seeing kind of a purpose to it all.
Ms. Morency?
I'm trying to remember last year when we were doing this, and I was brand new to the concept, but I remember us saying, we're going to do the same budget this year, present the same budget that we did last year to the commission. That was our final thing. We didn't, were there textbooks in the year before that? And did we just, I mean, did we make changes to the line items and come up with the same figure, or did we just do the exact same budget that we did the year before? Does anyone remember? It was the exact same budget. So therefore, and that's what I remember. So we're talking that last year when we did this budget, we weren't looking at books, and we weren't looking at K through 2. We weren't looking, so if that money wasn't in the budget, that's our fault. Because we just said, and I remember the direction that we gave them was, let's just do exactly the same budget that we had before. That's how I remember it. And then that's what got us in a lot of trouble, because we knew that there were line items that were more. And before we even took it to them, we knew that. So I'm saying that, you know, we can sit here and go over and over, you know, that what happened before, but let's start new and let's figure out what we want to fund this year and not end up coming back and go, we're just gonna ask for the same thing. Because that's what we did last year. We just asked for the same thing.
Mr. Bates?
And I agree with Ms. Parker. I think at the end of the day, I mean, a fundamental is you have to have something in each one of the grades. There has to be either textbooks or there's some sort of digital with the resources. You have to have one or the other. So I think that's a baseline for me. And if we don't have it, we've got to fix it. Then the second question is, okay, if there's something missing, what do we fill in the blank with? Is it option A or option B? And that's where I think we've got to give, as a board, some guidance, because we are kind of giving mixed signals. I mean, I know that there's a big push for us to buy a lot of textbooks, and that may be the answer. Maybe that is what fills in the blank, and we have to do that. But I do think we have to, as a board, collectively figure out, is it going to be the paper option? You know, is that option A, and then a digital type option? Is that going to be option B? I think we do have to sort through that and make a decision, because I do think that it's probably from a financial standpoint difficult to do both. And so I think we do have to kind of collectively figure out to do one or the other. I do think we did make a substantial investment in diploma, that we made a collective decision that we did want to go more in the digital direction. I don't think we're there yet. And I think by design, it was not to go ahead and jump off in the deep end of the pool. I mean, we weren't going to get in the 10-foot section of the pool first. I mean, we were going to start out at the 3-foot section and get started, because this is going to be a new endeavor, and there's going to be some mistakes, and there's going to be some hiccups. And so by design, you kind of want to roll that out in stages, do a little bit at first, see what works, what doesn't work, and then go to the next stage. I think that's kind of where we're at now. You know, we've kind of gone through the first year. Now are we going to go all in now? Are we going to get into maybe we're not ready for the deep end of the pool yet, but maybe we're ready for the middle section of the pool. So are we going to make that next step? Is that where we're going to invest these limited resources into more digital, or are we going to invest in more of the traditional textbooks? And it may be in some particular grades, maybe you don't have an option. Maybe in some of the grades at where we're at right now, we're just not ready to go digital, and we have to have something. I think it goes back to the baseline. There has to be something. You know, our schools and each individual grade has to have some resource to be able to work with. So.
The only thing I would make mention of is that this spring, many of the staff members have been working hard to become diploma certified. Here in the closing week of school, I think I've got, we did change it up, and so staff members are making digital portfolios showing artifacts from the Tim's rubric. And from Spring Hill High School alone this week, I think I've got close to 27 or 28 digital portfolios showing that they're ready to go. So I think the capacity is there for the instructors. There are, just coming to mind, I know there are teachers at Woodard Elementary that are ready to go, third grade teachers at Brown are ready to go. I think the staff are prepared for it. It's just allocating the resources. And then, again, we're here and we want to get here. There are so many different interim steps that we can take. For example, mobile labs in all the classrooms as opposed to computer labs. In talking with Mr. Schuyler, I know he's getting ready to change out some of the traditional labs because the desktops are at end of life. As far as additional funding mechanisms go, I'm kind of following in Dr. Marzak's wake here as far as reaching out to Columbia Power and Water and setting up the Roundup program, but assigning it to a building instead of a pot to go into the district. I know you're shaking your head, but it's something. No, and I'm not saying $1 million, but if it would, my neighbor happens to be the customer service gentleman, and we had lunch, and I don't remember, I want to say it was $6,000 total, but, and that was also split amongst the other schools in the Columbia Power and Water footprint. But I do think, though, Howell Elementary is one that comes to my mind through the PTOs. You know, as folks come to sign up, hey, you know, a $5 donation a month would go a long ways, not to one, but at least, you know, identifying a mobile lab for, you know, Mr. Marzek's third grade classroom, a mobile lab, you know, and just set up a pecking order so that folks know that when that funding is available, that's where it's going. The other piece, I kind of floated the idea with Columbia Power and Water as far as a match goes. So for every dollar that's donated, and they have to run it through the TVA, which I guess is the protocol, but we need to look at some alternative funding mechanisms to get the technology in the hands of the kids. Maybe not to being one-to-one, but at least it's at their fingertips, you know, so.
How much of the ask for textbooks that's $877 is for K through, what is it, K through 2?
The math would be included in that, and also the literature. I couldn't give you exact cost. I could look at a breakdown, but I think the literature overall, the English was about 300K for the literature, and around 500K or so for the math. But all that would include enough for K through 2. Actually, it's really K-12, but K-2 is included.
So
yes.
all of the $877 is for K through 2?
No. There's a portion of that is designed to. I have to go back and look at the report that I had for you all to know the cost. But there is a specific cost. I think for K2, just specifically for the mentor text for Read to Be Ready, I think it's somewhere around $295,000 specifically just for that. But we're spending about $300 plus on ELA that will support the other grades as well. And then the other $500,000 would support math K-12 for everybody.
Okay, I just bring it up because part of the discussion, they're not in the one-to-one, they're not being digital, so we've talked all year about that. We've got to do something about that, so. What do we do here? Where do we go? We have a budget and lots of concerns, so.
Am I hearing correctly that essentially we're gonna have several schools that are gonna be diploma certified, but we just won't have devices for them? And that would be another, since we're making the pile really big anyway.
Unless you want to increase that diploma year 2.
About $2 million, roughly.
Your call.
Is that right? Am I in the ballpark on that? Okay. I'm doing this at the top of my head, so it's pretty close.
I'm thinking the device we currently have selected is $3.5 million on an annual basis. I'm sorry, it's $3.5 million, I believe, Dr. Marzak, on an annual basis, and so another $2 million, yeah, you're there.
We wouldn't be able to shift anything off of well, at that point, we would have enough to fund all devices, but we wouldn't have everybody certified and ready to go, correct?
I'm pretty confident if the kids know that the things are coming,
We can get them ready.
we'll get them ready. I know the Spring Hill High School staff, that's one of the things they're positioning for is, you know,
Okay.
we're all certified. Just certify our kids and give us their devices and we'll go.
But I guess where I get back to on that is we're back in the same thing. If I don't know which parts of for example, is that going to take anything away from what we have approved for textbook needs? Is that going to shift any of that, or is that all still there?
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. When we looked at it back in the fall, it was gonna be almost 500,000 for K2 textbook
On its
needs. On its own. And that was I think that was different than Read to Be Ready, but my understanding is that a lot of the Read to Be Ready stuff I mean, we're still gonna have, we still have to get the mentor techs and things like
So
that,
we've only got another 300,000. It may free up.
potentially.
And then you've got, I mean, again, going back to the prioritized list you have here of the software, and you said that if you had to, you could give up 5 through 9. Was that correct?
Yes.
Dr. Woodard? On items 5 through 9, that was the ones you said if you had to give up, you could.
Oh, you mean prioritized items,
Yes,
5 through 9?
Which, that's only $340,000.
Yes, sir. But again, that's what we were offering up. If you felt that it needed to go, yes.
But if you're looking at going full out, the learning management system's gonna be critical. Because they have to have a portal in which to log into to do all their digital work.
Which one is that one?
That's number 7. 38,526.
It would go up, though, correct?
John, would it go up, or would it stay the same?
It should. It's
Power
it's a-
School?
It's a per device
The-
license.
I don't have the sheet in front of me, but if you're referring to the Power School Learning Management, my recommendation was to keep it at the same level as what it has been, and then to,
Because if my
Ex-
memory serves me correctly, is we're paying for all the students in the district to have it because we get it at a discounted rate, which is about $3 per kid. When we start to drop the number of licenses, the cost goes up to like almost $7 per kid. So keeping it for all versus cutting back and then losing that $3 per kid. And then if we add later, we don't get the $3 per kid price. We stay at the $7 per kid price, which means it's gonna cost us more over time. Does that make sense? So by doing it all students now, we get a lower locked-in price.
Again, I'm just trying to weigh what
Yeah.
comes or goes depending on which direction we go, and that's where I'm still struggling, because I'm not getting any clear direction on, maybe we're asking too much in the middle of a budget meeting to do this, but, that's what's frustrating on this end, is I don't know which pieces are gonna move depending on which direction we go.
No.
Except for the fact that it seems to drive the budget up every time.
Any other comments? I think we're gonna have to come with a clear direction if we're gonna make a change.
So you're saying if we keep computers, we've got to have number 7?
Yes, sir. Yeah, if a lot of the research on technology it's not just the device, it's also the learning management system that the students log into, where all of their work is stored, where they do, teachers talk back and forth to kids. And not only that, that's a part of a lot of the other stuff that we have currently with Power School. So like the student management system is now owned by Power School. Our assessment is owned by Power School. So the teachers can create a digital assessment that looks like TN Ready. They launch it. The kids log into the Power School system, take the test. It automatically scores it. The teacher gets that information, and everything's done inside. So kids don't have to log out, log in, go to a different website. It's all in one place for everybody.
So that's a required item.
If
and
we're
not
gonna
just a
if we're gonna move forward with diploma, then number 7, from a research base and a practical base, would be a requirement.
Okay, are any of the others required?
Dreambox is definitely not required. Mayan is definitely not required. IO isn't required, but it's an important data dashboard that a lot of our staff uses. It pulls from our student management system, it pulls from our assessment system, and it puts all of the information in one place for teachers and principals to use versus going to multiple systems and trying to put all that and piece all that together. ESGI is kind of like the Power School. It's an assessment tool for grades K through 1. Elementary K1 teacher said the Power School was more for older kids. It really wasn't good for elementary school kids. So it's a digital formative assessment tool. If we don't have enough digital tools, then teachers have to stretch out the time that assessment because they could put the kids on the banks of computers in the classroom. You could do that paper pencil, but then the teachers have to score all of it and disaggregate the data. You could do it. Discovery education, you saw the other night. The world-class digital content that comes with that packet. That would be critical if we're moving forward with diploma as well. Yes, sir.
So, let's, I'm trying to summarize where we are here. It would cost about 3 million, of which, how much is already in the budget?
1.3 is tentatively in the budget.
Okay. So that would add 1.7 million to that 13 million. It'll be more than that.
I'd say, for a good cushion,
Okay,
2.1
2.1.
on top of. Additional.
And when we look at the textbooks of the 877, 500,000 of that is for K through 2, which we really need and got to have. So you only got a savings of about 300,000 there. Okay, so no savings at
Yeah.
all.
Or you could stair-step diploma, do 1 million next year, and then ask for an additional $1 million a year after, and stair-step it. The reality that we're gonna have all 9,000 kids ready by the end of next year would be awesome. Don't know if we're there yet, maybe.
I really think, you know, the plan that has emerged is that, I mentioned the 5th grade. Every 5th grader is gonna have a device. The middle school kids, and again, I don't have my notes in front of me, but, you know, 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade, and most of the middle schools are gonna have devices. If you think of it kind of like a wave going through the system, and it hurts me to say this, but the high school students right now have been operating in either their own devices or the computer labs that they've got or something along those lines. And so again, I'd want to confer with Dr. Marzak, but in a wave type situation that I think your suggestion of, you know, 300,000, $1 million every year, so that the elementary, the middle school, that wave is coming, and so that the high school staff, that gives them time to prepare as well too. Because if you look at the staff across the district that have been diploma certified for a lot of different reasons, the majority of the diploma certified staff have been in the elementary grades and the middle grades. And the high school staff have, they're utilizing technology. I'm thinking of Central right now because they all have devices and the boards and all that. But it was interesting, the paradigm shift when we started talking about diploma certifying Central and Spring Hill. There were some staff that were concerned because they would no longer have disk drives on their computers, and that, you know, the movies that they had shared or video clips were on and if they got a new diploma laptop, they did not have a disk drive. So I'm in the process of getting some disk drives, and this summer I'm going to help some folks get them transferred onto flash drives. But you understand where I'm going? So if we do this wave through, and maybe that would be palatable to the county commission as well too, to say, hey, listen, we're working it through, and my heart breaks for those who are in high school right now, but again, that would be something that I'd want to coordinate with Dr. Marzak and stuff, but that might be an option.
Oh, excuse me, Mr. Bates.
And that's where, for me personally, that's where I think I would be more inclined, because I would be concerned if we just put down enough money to just buy a bunch of devices, we could end up creating more havoc, you know, and it wouldn't necessarily help the classrooms. But I think in some ways we're at 40% right now. I don't know if we were looking at the next wave of getting up to, maybe that puts us around 75% or something like that for the upcoming year, and then look at the future years to try to get us to the 100%. Seems to be the more prudent way of implementing, you know, because it's a pretty dramatic change that we're doing here, and I think we have to be sensitive to that, to the teachers and the principals and the schools, that we're not just doing too much too fast for them.
And my key concern is warehousing purchased material because not enough people have diploma certified yet. So let's say, for example, that it works. We get the 2 million, we buy all 9,000 devices, but by the end of next year, we only got 7,500 kids that are certified. So that means we have 1,500 devices sitting in a warehouse that have never been touched, that have never been used, and personally to me, that's a waste of money. That we could have thought a little bit more prudently on that. But if we could do a wave fashion, and we know we're gonna have this next year, we're able to work with staff, we're able to work with kids to get those adequately put out by the end of the year so that they're used, and then we do another wave. Maybe a little bit, you're right, maybe a little bit more prudent and better use of taxpayer dollars.
We keep talking certified. How's a student certified for us to give him a computer?
I'll follow your lead, sir.
So we have the student rubric based on the technology integration matrix rubric. So once a teacher gets certified and their group gets certified, they then have to turn around and certify the kids. So there are certain things according to the adaptation rubric, the middle of the road, the kids have to be doing. And what happens is when teachers say our kids are ready, we go through an observation process and we give them feedback if they're not, with the time to come back. And if they are, they go one-to-one. Now, Mr. Carver's working on a portfolio model. He's adjusting that certification process, but the kids have to demonstrate that they are doing things with their teachers in their classroom to integrate the use of technology effectively.
But the kids cannot get certified and taught if the teachers have not been certified.
The teachers have to be certified
And
first.
So how many teachers have we had that are dragging their tail, not wanting to go to it, that are not certified?
Mr. Carver?
And again, I don't have my notes here in front of me, but I believe of the 1,000 teachers we have here in the district, roughly, as of this afternoon, I think we've got maybe 500 and some, over half of them diploma certified.
So we've got half of them that have had well over a year to get certified that haven't done anything.
Well, and yeah, if I may make, one of the things that Dr. Marzek said about going out and getting feedback and such, I've tweaked the teacher protocol so that individual teachers can create a digital portfolio, put the artifacts on, and then they have to share that with their PBL coaches at their local buildings. The principal signs off, and then it comes to me. So they're getting several sets of eyes to look at it. The way it was before, if you and I were a math department and I wanted to do it and you didn't want to do it, it would be hard for us to get diploma certified because it was by department. And now, you mentioned the ones that want to get up and go. As I said, we've got a whole crew at Spring Hill High School that wanted to get up and go and have done it. The other thing about the digital portfolio, which is powerful, is that teachers are having to share their practice with other folks in their building, whereas before that wasn't necessarily. I mean, I was a classroom teacher. I never showed how I taught to people. And, some of the work has just been phenomenal. Some of it's very basic, but some of the work has been very impressive. So I have a spreadsheet now that has I'm thinking Spring Hill High School because I was looking at those before I came in. It's got the teacher's name. They've got the link where they've done their work, and I've given them feedback and approved them, and so we've individualized it. We've personalized it and individualized it. And again, I think there's a synergy happening that if we had another month of school, I think we could get more of them into that position. I know some of them are going to work on them over summer break. And, the other thing I want to make mention of, too, as far as the wave concept, think back to the young people that showed you how to do 3D rendering and the skill level of those kids in 4th grade. I mean, the skill level of those 4th grade kids is in some ways equal to some of the kids that are technical skills and juniors and seniors in high school. So by doing it in a wave, it's allowing the secondary teachers to get ready for that wave. So I just think the wave idea is a good idea.
So if we go to the wave idea, starting with the 5th grade, how many of the high schools have got devices, or we're just gonna take them out of their hands?
Well, as it stands right now, Mount Pleasant High School is totally one-to-one. And they were the first district-wide one-to-one school. And as it stands right now, it's kind of a closed system in that when the seniors graduate, they're going to retask the computers to the 8th graders coming up. So Mount Pleasant's separate, okay? And you got to look at each high school differently. The unit schools, I need to meet with their principals and figure out a plan for the unit schools because they're a little bit unique. The larger high schools, Central and Spring Hill, there are no students coming out of the middle school feeder schools that are going to those two high schools. So we're not having to worry about 8th graders going to one of those two schools. And their feeder schools like Withorn and Cox and Spring Hill Middle School, they're coming, but we're not having them migrate. So I hope that answers your question.
Well, I'm just, I think we probably didn't have a good plan. I mean, we don't have anything where we can say that all 5th graders, all 6th graders, all 7th graders, it's just hit and miss. And we don't have any definite, firm class that we can say they were computer literate and all.
Well, and again, I think that's something that's evolving. You know, again, I'm from Iowa, so we do GPS farming, where some places you put more fertilizer, some places you put less fertilizer. And I think that's one of the concepts that we've got to apply here. And again, I keep going back to Mount Pleasant High School. If nothing else, they're a good lab school for the rest of the schools to look at. I think you've all seen pictures on Twitter of Mr. Uhas's classroom and how that's evolved. We just need to continue to leverage that.
Well, I mean, it also disturbs me that Mount Pleasant was a standout and grasped it and took leadership in becoming certified for it, and none of our other high schools did. I mean, that's a problem.
Well, and again, when I came on board, Mount Pleasant, the campus there was designated, and Hampshire was designated. And the way the students and staff were diploma certified, I'm not going to take a computer away from a kid. And so as we deployed this fall, it was kind of sprinkled around through the field. But that being said, I think we've got a solid foundation to build from. Of all the places I go, I don't hear anybody saying, I want to go back. I want to go back to the way it used to be. And if anything, folks get mad at me. It's like, okay, if you look at the videos I think I've shared with the board, they're like, okay, so when are we going to get them? When are we going to get them? And there was a video I posted on the diploma website a couple weeks ago, and 20-year veteran teacher, and you look over her shoulder and she's got the groupings, and in her last comments is, I asked her, I said, could you go back to the way it used to be? Oh no, she said, I'd quit. So if anything, we've got the foundation to build from, but the board, the county commission, part of my responsibility is to figure out this implementation plan, this wave.
But let's be realistic. When we only purchased so many computers in the first round, Spring Hill, 1,100 students, Central, 1,300 students, that wasn't ever really where you were going to place the computers. You were going to put them in a school that was small enough where you could get, I mean, it wouldn't make sense to put a few here, a few there, a few. You needed to get it where it was a total school. Hampshire, small school, Mount Pleasant. So I don't think it's a question of whether the large schools and even Withorn, the bigger schools, we didn't have computers for them. And so that's part of it. I don't think anybody has sat back and said, well, I'm not going to do it or anything like that. I think it's just be realistic. We didn't have computer for them, so if they were to do the rubrics, then they'd be sitting waiting for 2 years to get a computer. So I think that the schools that got it have certainly shown us how it can enhance instruction and move things forward. I think that was a good choice to put it in those schools that were small enough to where they could go completely one-to-one, and it just makes us the need to maybe move faster to get them to the bigger schools.
But, oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Again, I keep going back to, I was a high school teacher, and in private conversations with some of the high school teachers, some of the young kids coming up, I mean, they want a chance to sharpen their game before they get there. Some of them are ready to go. I mean, I'm thinking of the Project Lead the Way classrooms. I just went blank, but the gentleman that is at Spring Hill, help me, Project Lead the Way teacher at Spring, Lang maybe?
Okay.
Dale
Dale.
Long, very visionary guy. He's ready. But it's just, again, we're here. We want to get here, and there's nobody saying turn around and go back. It's just, yeah, resources.
Ms. Morency?
You said that our students were 40% have the devices? Is that what is that counting the, what we're funding this year? Is it 300,000? Is that
Right,
counting
it's
those
300,000, and actually in the fall, when we have them deployed, 40% of the kids will have devices.
So that is counting the money that
Correct.
is in this budget to purchase?
We have something like 2,300 devices deployed right now today, and we've got another 1,327 coming. So in the fall, we would have 3,800 devices, and at that point,
Will be 40%.
in grades 3 through 12. In grades 3 through 12. The other thing that, kind of on the sidebar of this, is that one of the things I wanted to do too this summer is just get an inventory of exactly all the devices that are in the buildings. I know Mr. Schuyler probably has that, but for me to wrap my mind around so that you as a board know that at McDowell, for example, they've gotten a lot of iPads, and they're providing technology to the kids that way. And so I think that as we look to spread the fertilizer around, schools that might have support services through, and I know with Title I that you supplant and not, but you know, they may have some additional funding mechanisms that a school like some of the other schools may not have. At the end of the day, we want to get technology at the fingertips of all the kids. That's what we want at the end of the day.
Okay, if we use the devices, including the ones that we will be purchasing this year for the fall, and do 5th through 12, 5 through 12, how many devices would we need to do that?
I didn't bring that number. I've got it on my whiteboard at my office, and I can forward it to Dr. Marzak to forward to you all. But I want to say I think there's like 9,000 eligible children in grades 3 through 12. I can forward those numbers to you. I just
I'm
don't.
talking, because you said 5th grade. You said 5th grade, right, is what?
All the 5th graders in the district. And so there's like 1,021 5th graders. And the reason I've selected the 5th grade is that some of them were diploma certified in 4th grade, and so they're coming up.
Right.
And as a classroom teacher, to have some kids that do and some kids that don't. And we've made the promise has been made that if the student had the device, they would get it for 3 years. So I've just kind of focused on that 5th grade. Of course, those in middle schools that were 5th grade are moving up to 6th grade, and so there's that wave coming. And then my initial thinking was to backfill the 4th graders because the teachers taught in that modality this last year.
What I'm trying to get to
Yes.
is how many devices we would need to start the plan that you're talking about with the wave. So all 5th graders? And
And again, I wasn't prepared to speak, so I apologize, but I would estimate a $300,000 investment, an annual additional $300,000 investment. That brings us 1,300 devices that would allow us then to continue the way forward. It wouldn't get to the high school kids, but we could backfill the 4th grade and then fill in accordingly.
So you want to know the number of 5 through 12 students only? 6,723 kids.
and how many devices do we have?
With this next installment, it's like 3,874.
So we're about 50%.
minus 3,874. We still need 2,800 devices.
Would add a cost of how much?
I think it's like $750 with the case and software package and all that.
Yeah.
But we don't have to image them. Because you guys
So
approved
what
that.
are we looking,
And-
1.4?
Yeah, I think so. But then the next thing is you need to look at is, so are we gonna push or are we gonna pull? So if we say we're gonna go 512, and teachers, you don't have a choice, you have to start using technology in the fall, we're pushing technology on them, even if they're not ready. And that's gonna create a whole nother round of issues as well. Just go ahead and get the sign-in sheet ready, because it's gonna be long for board meetings. And so that was the idea of the pull program, is when you're ready, you tell us and you pull it in, and you're ready to go. Because, you know, talk to a lot of superintendents around the country, they've made mistakes with pushing programs. Because they said, when I bring a board member by, you need to be using it. And they say, yes, sir. And then the first question is, what am I supposed to be doing? Because they're not ready for that point. Whereas in the pull program, teachers have gone through professional development, they've worked with their colleagues, they've demonstrated mastery, and they've demonstrated they're ready to use it. And so that's, I think, that's one of the reasons why we've been successful with the ones that are using it, because they were ready. And they pulled in the technology and they're using it effectively. You know, one of the worst things we can do is push it and they don't use it. You know, they might as well sit in a warehouse as opposed to sitting in a classroom on the shelf because they're not being used.
But how long do we keep that teacher that never develops that pool attitude?
Well, you know, and that's, you know, talking to Dr. Woodard, that's where we're having conversations with principals. You know, I'm working with Mr. Carver on a scorecard of how many are we going to increase year after year of what's an acceptable level of teachers being certified for diploma. Kind of like we're doing the departmental scorecards. What's an acceptable amount of downtime for internet? What's an acceptable amount of late buses, you know, between intervene and success? I think the same thing we need to determine for teachers. What's an unacceptable number of teachers that are not diploma certified? Because if they're not, that's more professional development we need to be offering to the principal. We need to be in the school. We need to be offering. We need to be gently pushing towards the finish line. Because, yeah, we pull the starter gun and there's people that don't want to start the race. You know, the board says we are going to be diploma certified by 2026.
Dr.
We
Marzak,
have to go.
This goes back to my original question I asked you in your interview. Are you willing to make some tough decisions? And from what you just said, I don't think you're ready to make some tough decisions.
And you mean by terminate teachers that refuse to go diploma certified? If you guys want me to start doing that, I can do that.
Well, I mean, when the district says that our goal is to go 1-to-1.
By
And that-
2026.
And that's our plan. Well, I think 2026 is stretching it out too far.
Because that's what's in the strategic plan.
If you don't have computers, you can't,
Well, and then it goes back
it's a
to.
5-year plan, isn't it, the strategic plan?
I think we need to tell the commission what we need instead of cutting our budget year after year and letting it drag out that far.
Mr. Bates?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And of course, I don't want to go too fast. I mean, yes, we want to get there, but sometimes we can create more problems if we do things too much in a rush. So I do want some feedback. But I guess where I was kind of thinking, just thinking out loud, was basically we're kind of looking at maybe a 3-year plan. You know, we finished the first year. I think what I heard to get us to the full, was it 4th through 12th was going to be like another 2 million, I think, or 2.1. So I guess for me, what I was thinking is, if we're now entering in year 2, should we ask for an additional increased funding of 1 million of that, and then next year ask for the final 1 million? That would get us to where we're wanting to go. Now, we could definitely stretch that out. We could say, no, well, it's not a 3-year when we want to get there. Maybe it's 5 years, and we split that up and spread it out a little bit more. But that was just something that I was kind of just thinking in my mind. If we were wanting to get there in 3 years, then we probably ought to be asking for around $1 million in this year's budget, and then next year for the additional 1 million to get us where we need to be. Now, is that rushing things, though? You know, I don't want to be buying a bunch of computers and teachers aren't ready. And I think we have to be sensitive to teachers. I mean, yes, I want them to get to that point, but I mean, I understand, you know, you've trained a certain way, you've done things a certain way for a long time, and it can be difficult to make a 180. Now, there has to be some reasonableness in that, you know, and it cuts both ways. You know, I think we have to give the time to be able to make that transition. We can't rush it, but at the same time, I think it is reasonable to have some expectations that, look, we as a district, this is where we want to go, and we would like for you to get there with us. But if that's not where you want to go, then this may not be the right place. And I think that's just being reasonable. That's everybody being adults, and because it may not be for some people. It may be that that's not what they feel comfortable with, and we may not be the correct district for them. And that doesn't mean either side is wrong. It just means maybe there's a bad match. But I'm very sensitive. I want all of our teachers and all of our employees to be able to get there, and I want to give them a reasonable amount of time to be able to get there. Now, I will also throw out a caveat that at the end of the day, what I'm most concerned about is students getting good instruction. And if at the end of the day, if there's an old school teacher that wants to use a chalkboard and chalk, and he or she is knocking out of the park, then in my opinion, and I'm not a principal, but in my opinion, they get a veto. They get a pass on that. I mean, if they're getting to where those children need to be, that's at the end of the day, that's what all of our goals are. But it does look like, from looking at things, that having the digital devices does open up the world to things, and these kids, I know we're talking about getting certified, the kids will not have any problems. You could take probably just about every kid in the district right now and hand them a device, and they're going to be able to do fine, just about. I mean, I'm sure there's some exceptions. From a district standpoint, it's all of us adults that need the training, and we're all included. I mean, it's you know, some things I still don't completely understand using some of these programs, and I need a little time. You know, I hope somebody gives me the patience that I need to make some of those transitions. But at the same time, I think it is also reasonable to be trying to reach that goal, not being just kind of like, hey, I've only done it one way, and that's all the way I'm going to do it, and just everybody else just jump off a cliff. So, you know, you can't have that attitude either. So I think it's all about us being reasonable and having reasonable expectations of each other.
Well, at the end of the day, what are we going to do about budget? What do you want?
Follow up. I mean, I would be inclined, if that's what we as a board collectively think we want to try to get there in 3 years, then we're looking at just under that scenario, we would need to be asking for an additional $1 million in funding. But I do want to get feedback from staff that maybe that's rushing things. Maybe we don't need to be trying to do it that fast. So I need that feedback. And it may be us as a board, we may say, that's just too quick from a funding standpoint. Let's stretch that out over 5 years. So I think that's what we have to have that discussion. And then once we have that discussion figured out, the numbers will set themselves.
I do think giving some more reflection to this wave, and again, there is momentum in the district to become diploma certified. I mean, I've been very encouraged these last couple of weeks, especially that individual teachers in buildings can get her done. It's interesting, we had one student that helped their teacher create their digital portfolio, and when they submitted it, it still had the student's name on it. So we had a little talk about that. But you know, the other thing that I want to lift up too, though, is you know, I was reading in U.S. News and World Report, and both Hampshire and Mount Pleasant were both recognized. And you know, one of the things that's on the horizon is a teacher shortage. And if every child has a device, then the best instructors in Murray County can be providing instruction anywhere in the county, and you're not limited to being a student at Santa Fe or being a student at Hampshire or what have you. That's something that we were experimenting with before I arrived down here, especially in hard to fill advanced chemistry classes and that kind of stuff. And it may be such that if the high schools are on a unified bell schedule period, what have you, that the teacher, instead of originating the instruction from Santa Fe, the kids are all there, but the teacher can be, it's cheaper to buy a Prius cars and move the teachers around so that the instruction is originating from a different site. And really and truly, guys, that's the way of the world today. That's how work is done. But again, the wave, going in a wave, continuing on. This time next year, we should be close to having, going into next year, if the funding is at that $1 million mark, all the middle school kids next year, 5 through 8, should all have devices. That would mean, sir, that in 3 years' time, those 8th graders are going to be entering into the high school as 9th graders, and that gives the high school staff, basically 3 years to get ready. And then, of course, the other side of it is politically, with the election of a new governor, to get into that person's ear. And I know in Kentucky, Iowa, Maine, the state has allocated funding for digital devices. Tennessee's taken a good first step with the rental agreement. But to create a pool that districts can draw down upon to help lessen the burden on local districts, that's another political way we could go.
Mr. Moore?
I would just like to echo Mr. Bates' direction. I'd like to see it done. If the staff thinks it can be done in 3 years, and I would like to see it, I guess, if we're going to do the 1 million, and then would be the 2.1 for, I guess, the second year is what it would end up being. So if staff thinks we can do that, I think it's great. And to go along with what Mr. Dudley said as well, I mean, I know you need to be careful with pushing, but at some point you've got to. I mean, at some point we've got to keep this moving ahead. And I guess I disagree a little bit with you, Mr. Bates, on that part. The teacher that's stuck doing the chalkboard, I'd argue that why would we be pushing this if they could still educate them fully as we're looking at? If this is the direction we're going, they're not educating them fully at that point. Yes. They're missing something that we've deemed as a board that we want done. So that's where I would start. I mean, I understand the spirit of that, but I think that's where we would be having a little conflict as a board and what our direction is if we were to allow that. But I would like to see us do that in the 3-year period if staff thinks we can.
And completely in agreement with you guys. I mean, there has to be a grace period where people change their practice, but beyond that grace period, you've got to put your foot down and say no more. You don't have a choice but to get off the starting line. And so that's what we've been doing is, okay, come on. We've been pushing. Yeah, we're not getting much pushback. I'm not doing that. No. We do have some people saying, well, the funding's not going to be there. Is this something we even need to do? And our response is, well, that's what we're working with the school board and the county commission on. We're working to get there. And when it comes in, you don't want to be left sitting in the backdrop. So you need to be working towards this. You need to be pushing forward. And we're not getting pushback saying, no, I'm not going to do that. We're not getting it. Just for some people, it's just taking a little bit longer for them to get to that point. But I'm with you in complete agreement. At some point, you got to say, no. Like there was a court case. 30-year-old guy wouldn't get out of the house. Eventually, the judge had to say, get out. And we have to say the exact same thing. At some point, you can't drag your feet forever, because all that's doing is just hurting kids in the long run. Because if you're doing it in that area, there's most likely you're doing it in other areas as well. So we'll get to that point. I guarantee we'll get to that point. It's like Mark Edwards told you, David Bates, how did you get them all there? He said, well, we fired all the teachers that wouldn't do it. And we were like, what? He said, well, not immediately we didn't do it, but eventually we had to. We had to get to a point where they wouldn't integrate it. They refused to do it. And so we decided to terminate employment with them. And then we brought in people that would use it. But it wasn't right out of the gate. It was after a little period of time. Canton won't.
I do want to be crystal clear in that in 3 years, with the funding we're looking at, 8th graders going into 9th grade would have devices, but it would be for later boards to decide, 10th, 11th, and 12th graders. Because that would take an additional bump in one of those years to provide them for all kids. The plan that I've talked about is, 8th grade moving in, 7th grade moving in 8th grade, 8th grade moving in 9th grade, and it's just been a grade wave to fully do the high school, just so that the board, if it brings, I said, if it gets us to 9th grade, it will take an additional bump to get the 10th through 12th graders.
Ms. Moritz?
And more than what the teachers are teaching and how they want to teach, our kids need to be able to do the things that they're doing on these devices when they graduate. when they, you know, if they haven't learned that because one of the teachers didn't want to teach that way, they're going to be behind and they're not going to be able to do these things. So it's more about the kids than it is about the teachers.
Ms. Parker?
I still have reservations about this direction. I'll just be honest with you. I just still think that if our goal is to educate these kids and people are getting results with the chalkboard, I agree with Mr. Bates. I'm okay with that. Because I don't think when you decide that you're going to go, maybe when you decide to go into a certain career, you might get your laptop. But when you decide to go to college, they don't hand you a laptop. I mean, they didn't in my college, and I don't know that they do it now. Some do, but again, they're facing the same funding issue that we're facing. And I think that if we are going to prioritize it, instead of the instead of the materials list that I got, I'd rather just buy a laptop if that's really the direction that we need to be going as a system. I don't understand why I'm still getting a thing that says I need to send Ticonderoga pencils. I mean, that's the stuff that y'all need, to me, that y'all need to be looking at, because I don't want to buy that stuff if y'all aren't going to use it. And I don't think that everybody uses it, which is great if we don't have to use it. But I think we're inconsistent right now. And until there's some consistency on that side of the room, I just have a real hard time stomaching just saying we are jumping into the deep end. And especially when you're talking about teachers, are you saying then that you're going to be bringing us 10-year dismissals for insubordination for not getting on board with, is that what we're looking at? But we're going to have tenured teachers that potentially might be on the fence about.
And we hope that we don't get to that point. We hope,
Right.
because we've created a supportive environment where they're comfortable to risk and to try and to do things differently. But, if we get to a point where it's like difference between can't and won't, I can't do it or I won't do it.
Right.
Those are completely different. If you can't do it, we'll help you get there. If you won't, then yeah, I may be bringing a tenured teacher for dismissal because they refuse to follow the directives of not only the school board, who has put this in the strategic plan and said this is a part of where we're going as a district, but also you've neglected to follow the directive of the superintendent. And that is dismissible by Tennessee Code Annotated.
Understand can't and won't.
No.
But let's review just a minute. You're talking in terms of trying to have all fifth graders with a device, sixth graders, then seventh graders, then eighth graders. We're 3 years away from high school students getting it until the eighth grade goes up into the ninth grade.
With the next wave of devices, the first priority I've got is all the fifth graders in the district would have them. And fifth graders moving up into sixth grade, and there's some sixth grader in the seventh grade, it would just move up, okay? And then that wave, so yes, in 3 years' time, eighth graders going into ninth grade would have devices. But I do think that the 36 months is a good window for staff to get ready.
I think so too.
And I do think in 36 months, politically, a lot of things could be happening. But it's like anything else. Just as your orientation changes, you see things you've never seen before. When you guys started down this path, you thought this was going to be a good path. And so, like I said tonight, we just need to calibrate it a little bit.
Maybe rather than just go round and round, that maybe you need to bring us back, a 3-year and a 5-year? And where would you potentially cut in textbooks and maybe even in some of these that we don't need, some of this, and how that would play out? Is that what we're thinking in terms of? We don't have another budget meeting scheduled at this time. We certainly could meet next week, I guess. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, not Monday's holiday. I don't care. Yeah.
How much do you want us to go down? What would you like to see? Because what we don't want to do is come back and go, that wasn't enough, and we need to schedule another meeting. So what's a number?
Well, if you're going to add $1 million, then maybe you need to take $1 million out.
Okay.
I mean, if that's what we're talking. Huh? Or just,
If we've got $1 million to work with, you know,
yeah,
I don't know that maybe you guys just need to move those numbers around to get us where we need to be, but if we're gonna be sending, you know, an ask of 13 million to plus for the county commission, yeah,
might as well make it 14. Oh, my goodness. Yeah. Well, and I haven't been to that many, but I know they are very interested in the one-to-one. They're very much so interested in it.
Yeah.
So if that would help sell other things, then maybe you're right, maybe. I don't think so either.
I just think at some point we're gonna have to sharpen our pencils.
I think we
So,
will too.
But I don't know that anybody wants to leave anything on the table if we think that we're gonna get it, so.
So we go back to Mr. Dudley, ask what we need what we ask.
I mean, from the beginning, you guys had said, put it in the GP, put it in the GP, you know? So that's what we're bringing you, is a budget where you guys said, put it in, you need it, put it in the GP. And, you know, kind of going back to the budget impact summary, to the things at the bottom, the FY19 items requested but not funded, you know, $1.758 million were requests that were made by departments, and we said, no, we're not adding that in. So,
And you'll figure funding for the new ask for beginning.
got that?
Can you share with me or Amanda whatever the placement is of the teacher so we can figure it out?
Yeah, she's got it.
Okay.
The T and E, the learning experience grid. I got it right. With that, I'm sorry, excuse me, Dr. Wood.
Yes, ma'am, Madam Chair. Board members, just one quick thing before we end the night. We were having a discussion about the programs. I want to go back to that. There was part of this that I didn't get to finish with. Where we are with Dreambox, as I mentioned, that was a 3-year subscription, which auto-renews on June the 30th. So we're at a point where we need to make a decision. If we're going to cut it, we need to notify that company and give them a 30-day notice and send them a letter and let them know that we will not be renewing that contract. And we need to knock that out before probably June the 1st. If we are going to non-renew.
I think that hearing what the teachers have said and what the discussion was, I would think that Mine and Dreambox, I personally think we could let them go.
I would agree, but we can't take action tonight.
No, we can't take action.
Have a meeting.
But it is already in this, so that's another figure that can come out as well. So are there any others that you all wanted them as they figure this, Mr. Moore?
I would just be careful on that. I mean, I know you're getting some direction from the board, but again, this isn't action. We're not
Right.
taking any action on that. I mean, we have some board members that may feel like they need to take that we need to take those out. I just would be careful about.
Well, not only that, which we've got to get input
What you're
from Jake,
wanting to
which if we get rid of Dreambox, we can't buy any other elementary math software program
But,
because they'd be in competition.
Madam Chair, I think, though, as far as like the time-sensitive part of this,
Correct.
we'll be having, I guess, a formal special set prior to the end of that. So we'll be able to make.
Will it be before June 1st, Mr. Bates?
Oh, June 1st is what
Yes,
you
sir.
need to know.
We need to give them a 30-day notice. So, if you choose to.
Well,
We'll have Jake look at the contracts.
well,
We'll
here's the
send those
thing,
over to him.
if we gotta have a meeting next week, which I think we need to have a work session, we could follow up at the end of the work session, have a special call meeting just for that limited purpose, just to have a formal action of the board, as long as we have a quorum that night. So we could go ahead and
Correct.
give you all formal direction on that, I think.
Correct. Then would it be safe to assume that that would be to cut Dreambox and Mine both, correct?
Well,
And
I
then
think
we'll- and
that's
then we'll
what
go
would be
ahead.
on the item for the board to decide, because there's other board members that are not here tonight, and.
I
so
just
we're
want to
not-
be able to give Ms. Gagliano the correct cost to take out.
Yes.
Yes, okay, thank you.
Assuming that's what the board
219.
decides next week at the special call, yeah,
Well-
those would be the items that would be removed.
They're gonna present it to us, we could always put it back in. I mean, they're gonna present it to us without that in it. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, ma'am, that's what I'm asking. Those were two that.
To go along with that, I would just ask that staff be prepared to defend why they want it to stay.
Okay, absolutely. The other thing is, I did make one error with the Discovery. We have 2 more years remaining on the Discovery contract. We can get out of that one for the 19-20 school year if we notify them by November 15th of this year. So technically, we're just locked into 1 more year as of 2. I'm sorry, I misspoke on that. So we're locked into 1 more year with Discovery, and we can get out of that contract for the 19-20 school year with a letter by November 15th stating that we want out of that contract, which we could decide that at the meeting as well, if that's what you all would like to do as well. So I apologize for that. It's an error on my end.
Madam Chair, let me just say, I appreciate staff now bringing these contracts to us well before the renewal dates, because I think in the past, we had a bad habit of waiting till the last minute where we didn't really have enough time to make a decision, so I greatly appreciate that.
Next week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday? They're all bad.
You're driving the ship, you ordered pizza.
Tuesday would be helpful for me.
Tuesday it is.
Ms. Kinzer, before, I have one thing.
excuse me.
I just have one thing for you, Adjourn. If,
Oh, that's right, we do. All right. Tuesday's okay, let's put that down, we'll be sure, and we'll put it out, make sure everybody knows, and I'll have to do that email out tomorrow, so the other board members know as well.
at the board meeting, was that just Monday night? That seems like that was a long time ago. At the board meeting, there was some discussion about a capital budget, and I think Mr. Bates mentioned he thought that possibly had been passed. I actually went back to the April 30th meeting, and under 10.2.3, agenda item, discussion of facility needs for Spring Hill High School and McDowell Elementary School. That is where that you voted to ask the county commission for $40 million for a Spring Hill High School addition and rebuild McDowell Elementary School and for any other repairs as deemed necessary. I asked at the time, is this the capital budget or is this an immediate request, and was told this was an immediate request. Under agenda item 10.2.4, discussion of 2018-2019 capital budget requests, you voted to for a total of 8 buses to be added to the 18-19 capital budget request, and that passed. But I don't think technically you've passed a request for a capital funds from the county commission. Now, in the GP budget that we've presented to you, there is $2 million that would be used out of the GP for capital, but I'm assuming you're going to also ask them for additional facilities funds from the capital requests that we normally make with the budget. Now, that might be the $40 million, but I think the board would have to affirm what your capital budget request is for us to present to the county commission. We've, again, given you the document we presented forward to give you some guidance. You know, we've presented kind of some prioritized needs, but then you would have to pick what of those you'd want to present as a capital.
So we need to discuss that as well in work session, and we're also talking about a call, special call at that point. So we'll need to discuss capital as well, okay? Well, we can talk about it tonight. Yeah. We're all packing up here, but.
Sometime before you present to the county commission, because we typically will put that in budget presentation form to them, along with the GP budget request and the food service budget request. Normally, we do those three: the food service budget, which you've already approved, the GP budget. Now, we're probably going to have to amend that food service budget. I think he put in a 3% raise, and so we'll need to adjust that and bring that back to you. We can bring that back to you as well.
Okay.
And then adjust that to match that and get you to approve that. Also the GP budget and then the capital. We normally present all three of those.
Mr. Bates.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, Mr. Reed and I went back and watched the video myself, and it was a little confusing for me, I guess, because we did go ahead in one vote. We asked for the $40 million, and then in another vote, we did ask a request for the 18-19 year for the buses. I think in some ways, either way, it's a request for funding in 18-19, where we're at right now. I mean, this is what they're going to be funding is for the 18-19 year. For me, it doesn't really matter what you call it. you know, as far as what our request is gonna be, I do think, for me, where I'm a little bit up in the air as far as what our capital request is whether they fund the $2 million that we're requesting for ongoing maintenance in the GP. Because that could change for me personally, my position dramatically if they don't fund that. So to me, it's an either or. It's either they're going to make a commitment to take care of our schools on an ongoing basis. This is not a one and done situation. It's never been a one and done situation. And that's what's got us in this mess to begin with, of thinking you make a patch, a repair, and you're done for 30 years. So that's just, so I do think that's where it primarily needs to be addressed, is NGP. Hopefully the commission will agree with that and do that on an ongoing basis, so we don't have to just try to figure out whether some money's going to roll into our piggy bank or not, whether we're going to have enough money to take care of what our ongoing needs. So whatever we do, I want to be very clear with the commission that if they do not fund the $2 million in the GP, then I'm ready to go back and look at the capital again. Because it's one or the other, because I do think we still have ongoing neglected needs as far as what our repairs are, and I would like for us to take a look at that. But I'm hoping that we do it through the GP, is how they're going to be the primary funding formula going forward.
Mr. Moore.
And I would like to go right along with Mr. Bates on that. I know that's exactly where I want to be. I've been pushing and pushing for us to start to get the right number included in our GP budget that actually takes care of this, and I would rather see it there. Because again, these are known expenses we're going to have every year, and we shouldn't be having to ask for special money outside of what we normally ask for to take care of them. So that's I'm thinking the same way he is. I would like to see it in the GP, and what they do with that, I would still rather. I still think $2 million is too low, but we get what we can get and move up. But I think that's the right direction, and what they do with that would depend on how I want to approach it next as well.
And my question, I'm just, and maybe you're saying it and I'm not understanding it, but is there going to be, as we have in the past, a capital budget request packet to go along with the GP budget, which comes not as part of the GP budget, but as part of the capital, which would that be either for construction of schools or repairs of new schools or repairs of existing schools? And is that the $40 million, and if we package that up and put it with it? But I don't know that you all have actually approved that as a capital budget request for this year. So that, and Mr. Wolfer's not here to ask that question, but.
Yeah, because remember, we present 3 budgets: the food service, the capital, and then the GP.
And see, I think we have made a capital budget request. It's
40
just,
million.
The years is just something where they're going to fund it. Are they going to fund it, you know, in this fiscal year, next fiscal year? We've made, I think, a capital funding request repeatedly, multiple times. Whether they want to call it part of this fiscal year or next fiscal years, to me, is almost irrelevant. Either way, they got to find the funding, and they're going to have to fund it. So yes, for me, the answer is yes. We have, and we will continue to make a capital funding request. I think we've already got $40 million requested. If we need to go back, plus the buses, if we need to go back and add to that, we may have to do that. But I think that's already over there and going to continue to stay over there from my perspective. So I think the request is there. Now it's for the commission to make a decision regarding our request. So I don't want to keep going back and forth saying the same thing or requesting the same thing. But so yes, I think we have made a request. Now, if we need to go back for your purpose, Mr. Breeden, if you want us to label that as the 18-19, then we'll certainly do that.
I probably would defer, I'll ask Mr. Wolliver, but just something to make sure we're putting together the right thing to put together the package to present to them. And yeah, and we're fine with that. I'd love to get the $40 million because we know exactly.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? Then we adjourn. Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry.
When are we asking for additional funds for the items on our EGT or EBGT or whatever list? EMG.
And again, I'm assuming, because you're correct, there's still, what, $18 million years 1, 2, and 3 outstanding on that list. I'm assuming that whatever, the way I understood the $40 million is we would do the addition at Spring Hill High School, McDowell, and then whatever's left over apply to that 18 million.
I mean, I want to see us keep making progress on that list. And I mean, we're beginning to backtrack already. I mean, like I say, they've provided good funding the last year or two, but we're beginning to backtrack and fall off in that same ditch that we were in, that we're not taking care of our schools in a timely fashion. And so I don't want to see us losing ground.
Madam Chair, if I could speak to that, and I just want to be clear, Mr. Dudley, I agree with you, I guess, if they do not do the $2 million in GP for ongoing on an annual basis so that we stay current on towards like EMG items, then I'm in agreement that the capital request needs to be bumped up from the 40 million to include many of those EMG items because they are ongoing outstanding repairs that need to happen. For me personally, and other board members may not feel the same way, and I can certainly respect that. For me personally, I'm willing to stick at the 40 to do some of these big items, and then they help us with fixing this from an institutional standpoint, that there's going to be an ongoing $2 million for ongoing repairs. Now, is that going to get us caught up 100%? No, but that would be a substantial improvement based, in comparison with the way things were done in the past. I believe that if we had had an ongoing funding mechanism of about $2 million every year, we never would have got a $30 million list. We never would be there. We wouldn't be asking for that. So, but I do also respect that maybe it needs to be both, and I could certainly see that perspective that we're still not at zero yet. In an ideal world, we would go to the $2 million per year in GP after you get to zero. That just keeps you current. So I could definitely see a different perspective of that, and other board members may feel differently.
Well, I mean, Mr. Breeding has told us that bumping it up to $2 million is all going to be taken up. Any of that additional million is going to be taken up by paving projects, or could be taken up by paving projects. One item by itself, paving projects. And so, in my opinion, we're still losing ground.
Actually, I want to comment on my comment because I keep saying that over again. I'm being completely realistic when I say that. I know I'm saying it kind of joking, but we've already had the statistics when we went with Dr. Register's report that $2 million will not cover ongoing maintenance for this facility of this size. And $4 million is, actually, I think it was like 4.2 is technically where he was at. $4 million, and I'm not, you guys know me, I'm not one to just go around asking for extra money, but it is a simple fact that we have to maintain these facilities, and that's the real cost. And if you look at what we spent historically that we pulled out of fund balance every year, we're pretty much right there at that number. We've been spending it anyway. It's just been hidden from everybody. And as Mr. Bates likes to bring up, the fact that we lost some pennies really impacted our ability to do that. And it's pretty much cut it out, I think. So, I mean, I hate to keep saying just throw numbers in there, but that is a real representation of what it costs to maintain. And if we get the $2 million, and that's all we get, the fact is when it takes $4 million to maintain maintenance on this, we are going backwards. And I think everybody needs to understand that. That's just a reality of a school system of this size and the facilities that we have.